want to talk to you about your soul. I talked about your soul last week, and there's a CD of that sermon right back on the table. And I hope if you missed last week, you'll get it. But even if you were not here, you're still going to totally get this one, although it's a follow-up of sorts. Here's the thing I want you to remember from last week, or know about last week as we start. Your soul is that part of you that is the real you that God made. That's the part that can be lost. That's the part that can be sick or starved. That's the part that needs to be saved. And that's the part that has to be fed and nourished. And I gave the illustration of a dream one lady had. A dream of a lady who said, I walked through a zoo. And as I walked, I saw this great big cage with all sorts of animals of every kind. But right up at the bars, growling at me, reaching through the bars, were these carnivores, wolves, a whole wolf pack, hyenas, even foxes, lion, tiger here and there. And way in the back, she saw a graceful, quiet, brown-eyed gazelle. And that gazelle was starving. That gazelle had grown very weak for lack of nourishment. And she tried in the dream to feed the gazelle, but when she tossed food in there, immediately the rough, tough wolves and hyenas gobbled it up. And as she watched, the gazelle got weaker and weaker and then sunk down to the floor. She woke up knowing her soul is like that gazelle. Your soul is like that gazelle. There are lots of forces in the world around us. There are lots of things and pressures and people in the world around us that will gobble up our time, our energy unnecessarily. Time and energy that we may or may not have to give. And when we are giving more than we're taking in, we begin to starve. And you got to protect the soul. So, in regard to that dream, here's the thought that hit my mind even as I was telling you about it last week. I thought, okay, she's got this gazelle back in the back. They're all in the same cage. They gobble up the gazelle's food, blah, 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 so she's in trouble. Why not cross-fence the thing? Why not build a compartment that the gazelle can be, where the gazelle can be safe, unharmed, and easily fed, so that nothing else can get to her unless it be a person who comes with something to bring, something to nourish her, something to heal her, water to wash away all the gunk and the stench that happens when we live in this world. Now, that gazelle is like your soul. And I want to talk to you today about how to cross-fence your soul. I want to talk to you about setting boundaries for the sake of your soul, to protect your soul, to make sure your soul gets what your soul needs. Whether anything or anybody else does, the soul is the most important. Now, why is the soul so important? Well, I'm going to use a couple of familiar passages. Not so much to teach you, but to help you remember. Why? You will remember these. You ever thought about the word remember? Something has been dismembered. Pieces are missing. And so you remember. You put it all back together. In a sense, that's what we do on Sundays. We remember things that we tend to lose track of during the week. Here's one of those. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them in his own image. Some versions say in his likeness. We're talking about the spiritual part of you. The part of you that God has placed in every living soul. Then the next chapter, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, reading from the King James Version. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground. Just think of it. We come from the dust. The Bible says we return to the dust. Dust thou art, and to dust shalt thou return. Every part of your body, everything you've ever eaten to make you grow, to build your muscles, or whatever else might be attached to your skeleton. The skeleton itself, it all came from where? Ultimately from the dust. And at the end of life, this body, which really is made of dust, goes back. And Ecclesiastes says the spirit, the soul, returns to God who gave it. God formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Became. You already are. We come here that way. There are lots of there's a very natural biological process that created the biological part of you. But that becoming of a soul, that's something of a different order. That's something that God bestows. It's something he gave you, and therefore it's valuable because it's his image. It's the part of you that is capable of connecting with God. It's the part of you that can relate to God. It's the part of you that's capable of understanding spiritual things. The part of you that desires God. That part of you that, as far as we know, no other creature has. Certainly not on anywhere near that kind of level. Your soul then, mighty special. And so what do you do with a person or a thing that is that valuable? You respect it. You respect this person. You honor them and you protect them. You respect, you honor, you protect. And that's where we come to this business of cross fences. Cross fences in the soul. Ways to box off the soul, not so that nobody can ever get in. Now, there are plenty of people who would say already, oh, I got you, Lance, I'm way ahead of you. I got walls all around me and nobody gets in, nobody gets out. It's like a city under siege. The walls of Jericho were shut up tight, all the gates down, the moats full of crocodiles. Nobody's getting in here. Nobody's getting in here. I'm that tough. That's the way a man is. Well, that man is actually a scared little boy who's got a lot of things inside his soul that he's very insecure about. And he's scared for people to come in there and see what's there. And by coming in there, I mean, he's scared to open up his mouth, his heart, and share. He's scared to talk about the things that trouble him on the deepest level, his deepest fears, his deepest hopes, what he really wants from life. And therefore, this man is shut up in a cell and he too can starve, like people in a city under siege. He starves not because other things and other people are robbing him, taking his food. He starves because nothing gets in. Nobody gets in. And he starves. And when he gets sick, the soul gets sick, nobody is allowed in as a doctor. You know, those of you who already have fences in your soul, walls, let me start out. Good. Because you're way ahead of some people who don't have any fences, any boundaries. Anybody, any obnoxious person, family, friend, or stranger can walk into their lives, make some cutting remarks, insinuate something sarcastic, and they are pummeled by it and spend 3 or 4 days trying to get over it. I guess it's better to have walls than no walls at all, but listen, you are a step ahead, but what you got to do today is you got to cut some doors. Your work, if you're one of those people who lets nobody in, your soul is not healthy, I can already tell you. I know that. Even though people will hear this by radio, I know this about you. People who listen to CDs, I know this about you. If you're all walls and no door, you're starving, you're probably malnourished, and you're sick, please cut a door and learn who to let in. Now, the rest of us need to build the wall first. Build the wall first. Then the door. Then learn that there are some people I can trust to let into my soul. Again, by that I mean I can open up to them. I can share what's on my heart because I trust them. I know they're not a gossip. I know they'll keep a confidence. I know they're not going to judge me. I know that they're going to do what they can to encourage me. Those are the kind of people you got to let in. But you also got to recognize there are plenty of people who are just the opposite. And you know what kind of person I'm talking about. You can best tell them, you can best recognize them by the way you feel after an interaction with them. Is there anybody in your life you find yourself spending time with, and after that interaction is over, you go away and you find this slow seething resentment like a pot on a hot stove that gets hotter and hotter and hotter. And within half a day, you're starting to boil over a little bit and you feel resentment. Clue. Another way of putting it is this. There are certain people you get around and they have this supernatural, being sarcastic, it's actually very natural. They have this twisted gift of being able to push your buttons, and they know how to get to you. They know how to instill fear. They know how to instill guilt. They know how to upset you, and if they want to get in an argument, because some people do love to argue, they know what buzzwords to say to draw you in. And next thing you know, you're in this big fuss and you're debating, and on the way home, Thanksgiving, and you're already dreading next Thanksgiving. When you dread seeing this person again, it's because they are in some way taking something they shouldn't. They're trotting into an area where they got no business being. You know what they're not doing? They're not respecting your soul. They're not honoring the soul in you. And they sure aren't protecting you. And some of these people, surprise, surprise, guess what? Some of them are family members. Would you believe it? Some of them are family members. Let me show you a quote from a lady named Liz Gilbert. Here's what Liz Gilbert has to say about family members. The reason your family knows how to push your buttons is that they are the ones who installed them. And some of you know what I'm talking about. I've dealt with it in my own family. In fact, the very first big significant step of growth in my adult life came when I began to set some boundaries with my mother, who is a good woman, who loves me, and would never intentionally do anything. Let me say, she would never knowingly do anything to squash me, to hurt me, to take from me. But there's a whole lot of people who do a whole lot of damage, the kind of damage Jesus talked about from the cross when he said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And so if they mean no harm and you've been letting it go on for years or months, whatever the case is, and the way you rationalize it is, well, they mean no harm. It's all in fun. If it's all in fun, why isn't it fun for you? And if they mean no harm and yet they are causing harm, then they're causing harm. And what they meant is kind of irrelevant, isn't it? You got to recognize those people. You got to recognize them. And you got to know who they are. And you got to do the work ahead of time. Ahead of time. You got to start building the barrier, the boundary. I wouldn't call it barrier, because barrier sounds like something and is something that you can't penetrate. Again, a boundary with doors that have good solid, doors of solid oak that nobody's going to kick down. Strong lock system, but they can open. You better be building that ahead of time. Ahead of time. Because once you find yourself in that person's power, under their charm, especially if it's been going on for a long time, your mind will immediately go down that road that you don't want to go down, and you won't even realize it until it's too late. Until, I've already let them in. They did it again. I let them lure me in again. I got mad again. Now I'm dreading Thanksgiving again. Your soul is worth more than that. Don't try and wait to apply this message the next time you're about to be in one of those situations or when one just hops up on you. You got to start building it now so you will have it then. Think of it this way. Some people might be in the audience thinking, yeah, but Lance, all this self-protection stuff, isn't that kind of selfish? Shouldn't everybody have access to me? Shouldn't anybody be able to walk up to me and say whatever they think and me absorb it? Shouldn't they be able to do that? Isn't that the Christian way? Listen. No, no, and no. But Jesus took a beating for me. Shouldn't Jesus took pain? He was whipped. He went to the cross for me. And so how can you tell me I need to set boundaries and not let people mess up my soul? Well, listen carefully. First thing you need to know is that Jesus had established some very clear boundaries. Just the mere fact that you all know and may have never thought of in this way, when he'd spent enough time with those crowds and they had pulled the virtue out of him, he did not think, well, I will honor God by continuing to stay with these people until they no longer have any needs. Oh, folks, there are people in your life who are always going to have a need because they're just needy people, and you can't help all their needs. Jesus would draw a line. Nobody seemed to understand why, but at some point he'd say, that's enough. Hey, y'all get the boat. We're going to the other side of the lake. He'd go to the lake. He'd go to the mountains. You can too. But know when to go. Know when the hyenas, though they laugh and seem to be having fun, a laughing hyena is still a hyena. And you got to know where to draw the line. I got to get some rest for my soul. Why did Jesus do that? Was Jesus being selfish? Jesus knew something that we need to know. Something that, if true for him, is quadruply true for us. Here's the deal. God created you as a living soul with certain gifts. He's given you specific experiences. He's put particular people in your life to bless, ways he wants to use you, and you need to give God 100% of you. But guess what? If you've let some laughing hyena take chunk after chunk out of you and make you sick in the head, and you're walking around with resentment rather than joy, and you're overwhelmed and just kind of frustrated, are you at 100%? In fact, when you're in that kind of shape, you're not going to be a whole lot of help to anybody. Because in order to help somebody else, you've got to have something to give. Some love to give, some hope, some acceptance, some encouragement. But I'm telling you, the hyenas will gobble it up and it won't be there. And sidebar, a lot of folks need to know this. It's one of the most important things you'll ever learn if you are ministering to people. You need to know that you have to set limits on what you're willing to do. And if you're dealing with a person who's taking unfair advantage and demanding more and more, even a person who's got legitimate needs, I want to give you a clue. It's not just a clue, it is a sign, brother. When you start feeling resentment toward the person you're supposedly trying to help, you better stop what you're doing and draw a line and build a wall between you and that person. Everything in you, at least much of your previous training, will tell you, but I can't neglect them. I've either got to give them everything or I can't give them anything. False! You can't give them everything. if you do, you can't give them anything or anybody else. Here's the deal. When you start feeling the resentment, don't let that keep going, because you know what it'll do? It will actually destroy your love for that person, temporarily at least. I've done it, believe me. Done it probably in the last month. I mean, I do it, and I don't do it as often as I used to. I've got better fences. Jesus had fences. There's one place where a man came to Jesus. Man came to Jesus. This is Luke chapter 12. We can get that on the screen. And this man came to Jesus saying, Master, there's something I need you to get involved with here. Need your help, Master. Read the passage with me. Then someone called from the crowd, Teacher, please. Hear that, please? When somebody says please or please, pity pie with sugar on top, pretty please. Please, brother, tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me. He's asking Jesus to get involved in a family squabble. Jesus replied, Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that? I want you to see that Jesus was in touch with his soul. He knew what he was. He knew what he was not. He knew why he was here. And he also knew that if he let other people dictate what he does and doesn't do, people who are never satisfied anyway, there won't be enough left of him when it really counts. You might say it this way. Jesus knew how to pick his battles. There's never a shortage of needy people. But there are limits in your soul. Jesus did not expend his energy on things that were toxic anyway. There are some relationships between family members, spouses, that are so toxic and yucky and rotten because they've been stinking so long that there are some trained professionals who know how to walk into that cage with them with the right kind of protection on their heads and hearts, help the people walk out, then take off the protective gear. You may not be that person. Jesus, though, am I saying he avoided battles? No. He saved himself for the battles that counted, for the needs that mattered most. He couldn't meet everybody's need, but he knew there was one need that the whole world needed. For this cause, he said, I came into the world. That was his cross. And so he set his face to go to Jerusalem. He went there because boundaries had been broken. Innocent people were being exploited by a corrupt religious system with no life in it. It was a stench in the nostrils of Jesus. And Jesus knew that if he goes to Jerusalem and he walks into that money changer court and he pops that whip and he begins to flip tables and bust dove cages and send silver coins flying everywhere, and he chases the fake, hypocritical out of there, he knows that's going to bring it to a head. But in so doing, he's letting the common person know, this is ridiculous. I don't stand for this. You don't have to accept this, people. You don't need this. The veil in the temple is about to be rent in half. So whosoever will may come, and that means even you. Jesus went to Jerusalem knowing it was going to cost him. And it was going to hurt. And he went there without any battle gear, without a weapon. That day before Pilate, he drew no lines. He didn't argue for himself. He simply said to Pilate, I've come to bear witness to the truth. Bearing witness to that truth cost him his life. And when his disciple Peter said, no, don't do it, Lord, don't do it, Lord. What did he say? Get away from me, Satan. Get away. You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea. This is my space here. This is where I live and dwell and have my being, and this is why I'm here. Peter, you can't understand. Stay where you are. Keep those words to yourself. There are some people to whom you have to say, listen, I've heard and I've listened to your concerns, your complaints. I understand them. I've heard them many times. There's no need to keep repeating them. If I ever forget them, I'll let you know so you can remind me. But meanwhile, we're not going to talk about that. And if you insist on continuing to talk about that, I'll have to put some distance between us. Because I can't allow you to do that. You do that, you know what's going to happen? You establish walls and doors. You keep the destruction out, and you let the good, godly, healing people in. Your soul will thrive. And you know what else? Your love for people will explode. You will find that you love other human beings, all other human beings, like never before. Even those who always want something. Even those who try to exploit you. You know why you'll have that love? Because that's what a soul in communion with God produces. But a soul that is starved won't have it. I wish I had time to talk about how to know who to let in. That will be next week. For now, you go away knowing, have at least 3 people or 3 scenarios on your mind. You write them down, and you write down on paper what you're going to do. Draw those lines.